Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, at 2:26 in the afternoon. The entire world knows that. But what the world doesn't know is this. 3,000 miles away in a studio apartment with a single eastern window, a 63-year-old woman named Eleanor collapsed at the exact same moment. She died clutching a pair of black leather gloves she'd kept in a wooden box for 5 years. Medical examiners would later confirm her time of death, 2:26 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The same minute, the same breath, two hearts stopping as if connected by an invisible thread no one could see. This is the story of how a frozen February night in 2004 tied two souls together in a way that defied every rule of logic, distance, and time. If this story touches your heart, hit that like button and tell us in the comments, which city are you watching from? Eleanor had been 60 years old when her son walked her to the front door of the house she'd raised him in for 30 years. He'd handed her a suitcase, the same battered brown one she'd packed for his college trips, and locked the door behind her. No explanation, no apology, just the metallic click of the deadbolt sliding into place and the sound of her own breathing in the winter air. She'd spent 3 nights on the street. The first in a bus shelter, shivering against plexiglass walls covered in graffiti. The second in a doorway that smelled like urine and rotting cardboard. The third against a brick wall on a street corner where the wind cut through her thin coat like it wasn't there at all. February in the city felt like drowning in ice. The kind of cold that didn't just freeze your fingers, it froze your hope. Eleanor would never learn his name. Not until the day she heard it on the news, and her heart shattered into pieces too small to save. She sat against that brick wall on the 4th morning, watching her breath turn to fog, feeling her hands lose all sensation. Purple first, then gray, then something worse than cold, numb. The city moved around her like she'd already disappeared. Suits rushing past, coffee cups steaming, eyes that slid over her the way you'd avoid looking at roadkill. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger required energy, and she had none left. She'd given 30 years to a boy who'd become a man who couldn't look her in the eye when he shut the door. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep him warm, patched his jeans when they tore, stayed awake every night he'd coughed with fever. And this was how it ended. Frozen against a wall, invisible to a world that had already decided she didn't matter. She stared at the steam rising from a grate across the street and wondered if this was how people disappeared. Not with a scream or a fight, just quietly, cold, alone, forgotten. Then someone crouched in front of her. She didn't see his face at first, just the dark jacket, the scarf pulled high over his nose, the gloved hands reaching toward hers. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, muffled by the fabric covering his mouth. He asked if she was hurt. She tried to answer, but her jaw had locked shut. The cold had welded it closed. He didn't wait for words. He pulled off his gloves, black leather still warm from his hands, and wrapped them around hers. The heat shocked her system. Her skin screamed as blood rushed back into her fingers. It hurt worse than the cold had. Tears came then, not because of the pain, because someone had stopped. Because in a city of 8 million people moving like water around a stone, one person had seen her. He asked where she lived. She shook her head. He nodded once, stood, and disappeared around the corner. She thought he'd done his good deed and left, that she'd been worth 60 seconds of his day and nothing more. But 2 minutes later, a black car pulled up to the curb. Clean, quiet, engine humming like a heartbeat. The man opened the back door and helped her inside. The heat hit her like a wall. She gasped and it hurt. Her lungs weren't used to warmth anymore. He didn't ask questions, didn't lecture her or tell her what she should have done differently. He just drove 6 blocks through streets she didn't recognize and stopped in front of a small hotel with a faded sign that flickered in the gray morning light. He walked to the front desk and spoke in a voice too low for Eleanor to hear. She watched through the car window as he handed the clerk a stack of bills, more than she'd seen in months. The clerk counted, nodded. slid a key across the scarred wooden counter. The man came back and placed the key in Eleanor's palm. His fingers were gentle, careful, like she was something fragile that might break. Room 12, 2 weeks paid, food covered. You don't have to go back. She looked at him then. Really looked. Dark eyes that carried a sadness older than hers. A face she couldn't place but felt like she should know. A scar above his eyebrow that caught the morning light. She whispered one word. Why? He smiled. Faint, tired, heartbreaking. Because someone should. Then he walked out into the snow and disappeared. 5 years later, Eleanor would die at the exact moment his heart stopped. And the only person who would understand why was the neighbor who found her body and the wooden box she'd kept beside her bed. Eleanor spent 3 months in room 12. She found work cleaning office buildings at night. Silent work, invisible work, the kind where no one asked your name or why you limped when you walked. She saved every dollar, rented a studio apartment with a single window facing east, bought a secondhand table, a chair, a small television that got 3 channels on good days. She rebuilt her life one silent step at a time. But every February, on the anniversary of that frozen morning, she lit a candle and sat by the window holding the black leather gloves in her lap. She'd trace the worn seams with her fingertips and whisper into the darkness, "Thank you, Angel." She didn't know his name, didn't need to. What he'd given her couldn't be measured in names. She never told anyone what happened. How do you explain grace when it arrives without warning and leaves without asking for anything in return? Every night before sleep, she'd open that box and breathe in the faint scent of leather and something else she couldn't name. Kindness, maybe, or proof that she'd mattered to someone, even if only for 10 minutes on a frozen February morning. 5 years passed like water under ice, slow, cold, quiet. The gloves in that wooden box had belonged to the man the entire world would mourn, but Eleanor wouldn't learn that until the moment it killed her. June 25th, 2009. Eleanor came home from her night shift as dawn broke. She made chamomile tea, the only kind she could afford, and sat by her window to watch the light paint the buildings gold. She turned on the small television for the weather. She wanted to know if she'd need her jacket later, but the screen didn't show the forecast. It showed a face. The news anchor's voice was steady, but the words underneath weren't. Breaking news scrolled across the bottom in red letters that seemed to pulse with urgency. Los Angeles, cardiac arrest, paramedics called, rushed to UCLA Medical Center, pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. The mug slipped from Eleanor's hands. Chamomile tea spread across the floor in a slow, dark stain that looked like blood in the morning light. But she didn't move, couldn't move. The screen showed footage of crowds gathering outside a hospital, flowers piling on sidewalks, people weeping in the street, clutching each other like the ground had opened beneath them. The anchor repeated the name, over and over. Michael Jackson, Michael Jackson, Michael Jackson. The world was mourning a legend, but Eleanor was mourning the man who'd wrapped his gloves around her frozen hands and asked for nothing in return. Her chest tightened. She pressed a hand to her ribs and felt her heart slamming against bone like it was trying to escape. The room tilted. The walls bent inward. She tried to breathe, but the air wouldn't come. The man in the car. The voice that had said, because someone should. The gloves she'd kept for 5 years, worn smooth from her fingertips, tracing the seams every night before sleep. It was him. She'd known. Somewhere deep in the part of her that didn't need proof, she'd always known. But she'd never let herself believe it, because people like him didn't stop for people like her. Except he had, and now he was gone. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind refuses to accept. And Eleanor's heart had been screaming the truth for 5 years. The pain hit her differently than the cold had 5 years before. This pain had no location. It was everywhere and nowhere. It tore through her chest, her throat, her stomach. It reached into the parts of her that still remembered what it felt like to matter. She stood on legs that didn't feel like hers anymore and stumbled toward the phone on the wall. But her knees buckled. She hit the floor hard, her cheeks slamming against the cold linoleum. The television kept playing. She could hear it. Reporters talking, people crying, someone singing one of his songs like a prayer. She reached toward the screen with fingers that had gone numb again. Not from cold this time, from something worse. Please, please don't go. Her vision blurred at the edges. The room darkened. Her chest stopped moving. The television played on. The neighbor who found Eleanor's body 2 hours later would discover something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Something that would make her question everything she thought she knew about coincidence, connection, and the invisible threads that tie certain souls together. Mrs. Alvarez had been walking past Eleanor's door when she heard the television through the wall. Loud, relentless, the same words on a loop. Breaking news. Michael Jackson, dead at 2:26 p.m. She knocked. No answer. She used the spare key Eleanor had given her months ago, just in case. Eleanor lay beside the table, her hand stretched toward the screen. Her eyes were open, but seeing nothing. The tea stain was still wet on the floor. The television was still on, still showing his face. Mrs. Alvarez screamed. The paramedics arrived within 4 minutes. They checked Eleanor's pulse, her pupils, the rhythm that should have been in her chest, but wasn't. There was nothing. She'd been gone for at least 2 hours, maybe more. The coroner's report would later list her time of death, 2:26 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the exact moment Michael Jackson's heart had stopped in Los Angeles, not 5 minutes before, not 10 minutes after, the same breath, the same second, as if her heart had been waiting for his to stop first. Mrs. Alvarez searched for Eleanor's family. There was no one. Just a wooden box on the nightstand. Inside, a pair of black leather gloves, still warm after 5 years. Underneath, a hotel receipt from February 2004. Faded ink. Paid in full. Guest of MJ. Eleanor had whispered to those gloves every night for 5 years. Thank you, Angel. She never knew his name, but her heart did, and when his stopped, hers followed. Mrs. Alvarez kept the gloves, framed the receipt, and every June 25th after that, she lit 2 candles in her window, one for Eleanor, one for the man who'd saved her. 2 hearts, same moment, forever connected.